Starting off at number 10, we have Nioh. This action RPG combines the unforgiving difficulty of Dark Souls with the fast-paced combat of a samurai epic. What makes Nioh stand out isn't just its difficulty but how it demands mastery over its intricate mechanics. The Ki Pulse, a system for managing stamina recovery, adds an extra layer of complexity to every encounter. You can't just swing your weapon wildly, you'll need precise timing and strategy to stay alive. The enemies range from tricky human foes to monstrous yokai that can annihilate you in seconds if you're not careful. And then there are the bosses, which feel more like endurance tests than simple fights. Every one of them is unique, challenging you to learn new patterns and adapt your playstyle. Nioh is definitely not for the faint-hearted, but once you master its systems, it's one of the most rewarding gaming experiences out there. Moving on to number 9, it's the legendary Ninja Gaiden 2. If you've ever heard of this game, you know it's a rite of passage for hardcore gamers. This is the kind of game that will absolutely destroy you for making even the smallest mistake. The combat is ridiculously fast, and the enemies are ruthless. They'll swarm you, throw projectiles, and counter your every move, all while you're trying to keep up with the insane pace of the gameplay. What makes Ninja Gaiden 2 so brutal is that it doesn't just punish poor decision-making, it punishes hesitation. You need to be aggressive, but you also need precision, timing, and a solid understanding of your moveset. The bosses are a whole other story, giant monstrosities that feel impossible until you nail that perfect strategy. This game doesn't come with a difficulty slider, it's just hard, plain and simple, and that's why it's still one of the toughest games ever made. At number 8, we have Lies of P, a modern take on the Souls-like genre that's already making waves for its punishing difficulty. Imagine Bloodborne meets Pinocchio, and you've got a pretty good idea of what to expect. The combat is fast, strategic, and downright brutal. Every enemy encounter feels like it could be your last, and the bosses? They're equal parts terrifying and exhilarating. What sets Lies of P apart is its weapon customization system, which lets you mix and match parts to suit your playstyle. But don't let that fool you, no amount of weapon upgrades will save you if you're not on top of your game. Dodging, parrying, and timing are the keys to survival, and the game rewards patience and skill over brute force. It's challenging, it's beautiful, and it's definitely earned its spot on this list. Next up, at number 7, we have Sifu, a game that redefines what it means to master combat. This isn't your typical action game. It's a relentless test of skill, timing, and discipline. The combat system is incredibly fluid, but it's also brutally unforgiving. Every encounter feels like a high-stakes duel, and even the most basic enemies can overwhelm you if you're not careful. The game's unique twist is its aging mechanic. Every time you die, your character ages, which increases your damage output but decreases your health. This adds a layer of strategy to every fight. How far can you push yourself before the risks outweigh the rewards? Sifu isn't just about beating the game, it's about mastering its mechanics and truly understanding the art of combat. It's tough, but the satisfaction of nailing a perfect fight is unmatched. At number 6, we have Elden Ring, the latest masterpiece from Software. This open-world RPG combines the brutal difficulty of Dark Souls with the freedom of exploration. It's massive, it's beautiful, and it's absolutely unforgiving. From the moment you step into the lands between, you're met with enemies that can end you in seconds if you're not careful. The game encourages exploration, but it never makes things easy. You'll find yourself wandering into areas you're not ready for, facing off against enemies that seem impossible at first. And then there are the bosses, which are some of the most epic and challenging fights in gaming history. Elden Ring is a game that demands your full attention, but it rewards your effort with some of the most satisfying moments you'll ever experience in a game. Coming in at number 5 is Dark Souls 3, a game that's synonymous with challenging gameplay. This is the culmination of everything From Software learned from its previous titles, and it shows. The combat is faster and more fluid than earlier entries in the series, but it's still just as punishing. Every area is filled with enemies that can ruin your day if you're not paying attention, and the bosses are some of the most memorable in the series. What makes Dark Souls 3 so tough is how it forces you to adapt. You can't just rely on one strategy, you need to learn enemy patterns, experiment with weapons, and think on your feet. It's a tough journey, but one that's absolutely worth it. At number 4, we've got Bloodborne, a gothic masterpiece that's as challenging as it is atmospheric. Unlike the slower, more methodical combat of Dark Souls, Bloodborne forces you to be aggressive. There's no shield to hide behind here, you're expected to dodge, parry, and go on the offensive. The enemies are faster, the bosses are relentless, and the game's risk-reward mechanics keep you constantly on edge. add to that the hauntingly beautiful world of Yharnam, and you've got an experience that's as terrifying as it is rewarding. Bloodborne isn't just hard, it's a game that forces you to confront its challenges head-on. Taking the third spot is Hollow Knight, a 2D action platformer that's deceptively difficult. At first glance, it looks like a charming indie game, but don't be fooled. This game is a brutal test of skill and patience. The intricate level design and challenging platforming sections will keep you on your toes, while the boss fights are some of the toughest you'll find in the genre. What makes Hollow Knight stand out is how it rewards exploration and persistence. The game's sprawling world is full of secrets, and every new area feels like an accomplishment. But be warned, progress doesn't come easy, and you'll die more times than you can count before mastering the game's mechanics. At number 2, we have Armored Core 6, a game that takes mecha combat to an entirely new level of difficulty. This isn't just a game about piloting giant robots, it's about mastering their complex systems and learning how to adapt to every mission. The enemies are relentless, the bosses are massive, and the sheer amount of customization can be overwhelming at first. What makes Armored Core 6 so tough is its learning curve. You'll spend hours fine-tuning your mech, experimenting with different builds, and figuring out the best strategies for each encounter. It's challenging, but once you get the hang of it, there's nothing quite like the thrill of taking down a massive boss with a perfectly executed plan. And finally, at number 1, we have Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. This is From Software at its most unforgiving. Unlike Dark Souls or Bloodborne, there's no leveling system or multiplayer to bail you out here. It's just you, your sword, and your skills. The combat is all about precision and timing. Parrying is your best friend, and every encounter feels like a duel to the death. The bosses are some of the toughest in gaming, requiring you to learn their patterns and execute your moves perfectly. But what makes Sekiro truly special is how it forces you to improve. Every death is a lesson, and every victory feels like a hard-earned triumph. It's brutally difficult, but that's exactly why it's one of the greatest games ever made.